I've watched that video probably 100 times, but every time I see it, I still choke up a little bit because it represents for me what the campaign was about. And if you notice something that's missing from that video, it's that Barack Obama isn't really in it at all. And that was the core of what new media and technology allowed us to do, was to build a campaign that wasn't about a single person or a packaged message, but was about a movement of people who were involved in something bigger than themselves. So what's the impact of all of this? What's the impact of the scenes that you saw? It's not just emotional, it's concrete. And we had specific outcomes that we were in charge of putting together for the campaign. We got 13 million supporters. I'll go through some numbers here. 13 million supporters signed up online on the internet. That's about 1 out of every 5 or 6 votes that we got. One out of every 5 or 6 voters was signed up on our email list. Millions of phone calls made. In addition to driving people, those 13 million people, driving them into our offices in the traditional sense, we also enabled them to make phone calls to other voters from home so that they could have an impact even if they couldn't be part in the traditional way. The same thing for knocking on doors in neighborhoods. We were able to deliver targeted voter lists to our volunteers in their neighborhoods without them having to ever interact with our staff. 200,000 offline events occurred that were tracked by our website. Now, just to give you a sense, only about 5% of those events that were planned and people RSVP'd for on our website was our staff involved in at all. The other 95% of these events were created by ordinary people coming to our website and using our site as a public utility for their own self-organization. Videos like the one that you saw, we wound up producing, with a small in-house team in the campaign, we produced more than 2,000 videos for our YouTube channel. And when you add up all the minutes of those videos and the number of people who watched them, it adds up to 1.2 billion minutes of our campaign-created videos that people consume. So not just, that doesn't include all of the grassroots videos that people created and all of the other activity that happened, but our campaign message, our campaign-created content was viewed for 1.2 billion minutes. That adds up to about 2,000 continuous years of one person looking at through all the video. And of course, $500 million was donated to the campaign, with an average donation of less than $100. 3 million people gave 6.5 million donations through the internet. How did we generate all of this? This is the 3 principles that I wanted to talk to you about today, and I'll briefly go through how we approached each of these challenges, the fundraising, the organizing, and communications, with these principles. The first one is transparency. It's sort of a radical notion to lay out your campaign strategy ahead of time, but we knew that in order for us to be successful, in order to actually motivate millions of people to be involved, we had to be as transparent as possible about what that process would look like. And sometimes we had bad news for people. We weren't winning, and we were transparent about that. Sometimes we had bad news for people in the fact that we were going to ask them to partake in very boring trainings and exercises to get them trained to deal with other volunteers or to participate in the caucus process. But we were always very, very clear about exactly what we were doing and why we were doing it. And we were also very clear to share any data or results from the actions that our volunteers took. So whether it was a fundraising goal or the number of voters we were contacting or our poll results, we were very clear with folks. And this built a relationship with them where they trusted what we were doing. And when moments of crisis came, when we weren't winning, when things weren't going as well as we'd hoped, it was that investment in transparency that gave people the confidence in the organization and in the organization's leadership to continue to be involved. 2, authenticity. This is something that often gets lost in campaigns, but also in the public sector. Just the simple fact of a human voice, that there's a human on the other end of the interaction. Even with a big organization delivering services or a big campaign running television ads all the time, it's important that people be able to still feel that there's a human connection on the other side of it. And that really increased the investment our folks felt. In general, we tried to make all aspects of the relationship we had with supporters and with voters feel real and human. Third was participation. Every single thing we undertook, we always looked for a way to get more people involved in that activity. Now, that means opening up the process for people to participate, but it also means not wasting people's time. And so when we asked for volunteer time and volunteers to take action, it was always on something that was concretely related to the outcome and the mission of the organization, which is very, very important, because there's a lot of people who say, okay, well, we're going to do the serious work here, you know, us serious people in the conference room, but we'll give this thing for people to spin their wheels and waste their time out there so that they feel like they're participating. And we tried to avoid that as much as possible. And sometimes that meant explaining people something much more complicated than you would want to. Sometimes that meant thinking really hard about how to get people involved, but respecting the fact that people had only an hour to give here, an hour to give there, and that they were very busy lives was something that was very important, and they were involved in every aspect of the organization. It's also important to remember that the conversation that you're having in terms of the transparency and authenticity needs to be two-way. So that means having a conversation but also getting the feedback. And so participation just in the planning process and laying out the goals and the vision for the organization, making sure that was a two-way conversation, was essential to people's buy-in. So I want to talk about three projects that each in themselves apply these different principles to how we executed the campaign. The first one was communication. The press side of the campaign spent a lot of time dealing with media outlets, and the speech writing team spent time delivering speeches, and the TV ads team spent a lot of time crafting message for undecided voters. But first and foremost, we took the project of communicating with our supporters and focused on building relationships, both with our supporters and the candidate, but also among our supporters themselves. Campaigns and political parties and big organizations typically have those two audiences in mind, the press or the undecided voters. And we believe that the supporters were an underutilized audience for our content. So we built relationships through that content. We got into the content business. What you see right there on the screen is a page from the most popular part of our website, which was our blog. We took the opportunity there to not just post press releases, but to actually hire a journalist, a former journalist, to be in charge of all the written content for our website. So someone who was familiar and well-versed in the art of telling a story. And so part of what we did every single day was call up supporters on the phone and interview them and ask them about why they were participating in the campaign and ask them to send in a photo. And we would write that up and put that up to show and sort of feed and provide the glue of the relationship with supporters. We produced, as I mentioned before, 2,000 YouTube videos. We also hired a former journalist to run our video. So the woman that we actually hired had made documentaries for CNN and had made one about the Dean campaign. And she asked if she could come make a documentary about the Obama campaign, and I said no, but come inside and document this movement for supporters. And so whether it was videos like the one you saw at the top of the presentation or this one, and this one in particular is a good story, we decided that as things got hot and heavy in the general election, we started to do strategy briefings direct from the campaign manager. So we had always been working to provide a transparent view into what the organization was planning and why we were doing what we were doing. But this presentation, actually, these became some of the most popular videos we produced. And this is my boss, David Plouffe, in his office, filmed not with a fancy camera or any lights, but that's his actual office. And that video was filmed on a computer like this, with the camera embedded right in the monitor there. And it doesn't look very good and doesn't sound very good, but it provided a sense of authenticity so that even when the computer broke one time and we weren't able to film it as we wanted, we used polished audio from a camera, but not using the camera to actually shoot it. We still shot it with the computer. And that authentic voice from him and a transparent look into our campaign strategy was a key component of our content. And as I mentioned, the two-way conversation. This is another post from our blog where we had our foreign policy advisors sit down and take questions from folks. And it was 45 minutes of their time that they had agreed to beforehand. They wound up sitting there for an hour and a half, taking questions from our supporters about our foreign policy stance. And while they were doing it, we took this picture of it and posted it online. And so brought back the sense of transparency both into the actual creation of our foreign policy platform, but also transparency about the process of what was taking place.